The Galactic High Court was built to make visitors feel small. Its ceiling stretched like an artificial sky, glowing with the light of distant stars. The floor was smooth crystal, cold and flawless. Thrones of many shapes floated in the air, each one holding a ruler from a powerful species. These beings had ruled planets, ended wars, and decided the fate of civilizations with a single word. And yet, none of them spoke. In the center of the chamber stood one human. He did not wear royal clothes. He did not carry a weapon. His jacket was old, his boots scratched from long travel. His brown hair was messy, and dark circles rested under his eyes. He looked like someone who had not slept properly in a long time. His name was Ethan Cole. He stood with his hands at his sides, calm but tired, while hundreds of alien eyes studied him. Some stared with curiosity, others with fear. A few with open disbelief. At the highest point of the chamber sat Queen Seralith, ruler of the Varex Dominion. Her throne was carved from living crystal, slowly shifting colors like frozen lightning. Her silver skin reflected the starlight, and her long eyes held the weight of 10,000 years of rule. She had watched empires rise and fall. She had never seen a moment like this. The stellar collapse crisis had almost destroyed the galaxy. Artificial stars used by countless civilizations had begun to fail in a deadly chain reaction. Systems vanished without warning. Fleets disappeared. Entire species were erased before they could even send a final message. For 300 years, the greatest minds had tried to stop it. They failed, and now the crisis was over because of the human. Queen Seralith finally spoke, her voice echoing softly through the vast chamber. "Human Ethan Cole," she said. Slowly and carefully, step forward. He took 3 steps ahead. The sound of his boots felt loud in the silence. "You were sent by Earth," the Queen continued. "A world young by our standards, divided, unstable." Some rulers shifted at her words. She leaned forward slightly. "And yet," she said, "the crisis that defeated us ended after your arrival." Ethan nodded once. "Yes, Your Majesty." A low murmur spread across the chamber. The Queen raised one hand, and silence returned. "Our records show," she said, "that you were given full access to our systems, our stars, and our greatest scientific minds. Yes, you worked without rest," she said. "You refused honor guards. You ignored political status. Yes." Her fingers tightened against her throne. "And you solved the stellar collapse crisis," she said, her voice dropping. "In 18 standard days." The chamber froze. Even the air felt heavy. Queen Seralith's eyes widened just a little, enough to shock every ruler watching. "You solved this in 18 days?" She whispered. Her voice was no longer the voice of a ruler. It was the voice of disbelief. Ethan hesitated, then lifted one shoulder in a small shrug. "Yes," he said simply. The whisper that followed was like a storm. 18 days. What had taken others centuries? What had cost trillions of lives? What had broken gods and empires? Solved by one human in less than a month. Queen Seralith studied him carefully. She expected pride. She expected fear. She expected arrogance. She saw none of it. Instead, she saw exhaustion. "Why?" she asked quietly. "Why were you able to succeed when we failed?" Ethan looked around the chamber, at the powerful beings, at the perfect systems, at the flawless technology. Then he looked back at the Queen. "Because," he said, choosing his words carefully, "we don't wait for perfect answers." The Queen frowned slightly. "We fix things while they're still breaking." Silence returned, deeper than before. For the first time in her long reign, Queen Seralith felt something unfamiliar settle in her chest. Hope and fear. Because if humans could do this, what else could they do? To be continued. The stellar collapse crisis was not a problem anyone could ignore. It was not a puzzle or a test. It was a slow, relentless death that crept through the galaxy like a shadow swallowing stars. Every artificial star that failed sent waves of destruction through its system. Entire planets lost light, warmth, and life. Ships disappeared without trace. Communication lines twisted and broke. Time itself seemed to shiver, stretching and bending unpredictably. The Varex Dominion had called this chain reaction the silent collapse, and it had haunted them for 3 centuries. For generations, the best minds in the galaxy had tried to stop it. They built supercomputers the size of moons. They mined the cores of dead stars to gather power for experiments. They sacrificed planets, entire populations, in simulations meant to contain the crisis. Nothing worked. Every attempt failed. Every solution crumbled under the weight of the universe's chaos. Even the Varex Queen Seralith, who had ruled with unmatched wisdom and precision for centuries, had begun to feel the sting of despair. Civilizations begged, pleaded, or screamed for her to find a solution. And when she failed, whole species fell into silence, their names erased from records. The Queen had seen entire fleets vanish, entire systems reduced to dark voids, and yet she remained outwardly composed, her calm like polished glass hiding a deep crack beneath. But the humans, they were different. When the message came from Earth, most of the rulers laughed. A young, fragile species from a blue planet, barely capable of orbiting their own star, claiming they could help? Absurd. The Varex Council itself doubted the Queen's judgment. Some whispered that she had finally lost her mind. But she saw something in that message. Not arrogance, not hope, not fear, but determination. It was a single line that caught her attention. We don't promise success, but we promise effort. For a moment, Seralith had paused, reading and rereading the words. No other species had ever admitted they might fail. Not to her. Not to anyone. In all her years, no one had ever approached the crisis with such honesty. She recognized the truth. This human might not succeed, but he would not give up. That was more than her most brilliant scientists had shown in centuries. So she authorized it. She sent one human. One fragile, untested being, armed only with determination and curiosity. Ethan Cole arrived in the heart of the Varex Dominion's control chamber, with no guards, no entourage, no special privileges. He came quietly, almost invisibly, among the swirling alien council and their floating thrones. The Varex scientists studied him with disbelief. They had charts, simulations, equations, and centuries of experience. And yet, here stood a human, barefoot in spirit, if not literally, asking questions that no one had thought to ask. "Why do you assume the stars will behave perfectly?" he asked. "What if the systems fail in ways you have not imagined? Have you considered letting failure happen safely?" Their responses were quick, sharp, and dismissive. Humans were fragile. They were illogical. They were dangerous to trust. Yet Ethan did not argue. He listened, he observed, he made notes. He slept on the floor when he should have rested at a throne. He watched simulations run and fail. And he learned. By the 5th day, he had quietly unplugged one of their largest simulations, sending the system into a controlled collapse. Panic erupted in the labs, alarms blared, and scientists screamed at him. But he only watched, calm, writing down what happened. "Now we know where it breaks," he said softly. No apology. No fear. Only observation. On the 7th day, he rewrote equations that had not changed for centuries. Entire mathematical models, sacred to the Varex, were written by a human's hand. The chamber trembled with outrage, whispers of heresy and madness, and yet the Queen did not intervene. She waited. She observed the human that dared to challenge millennia of perfection. By the 12th day, Ethan had failed spectacularly. One artificial star collapsed far too early. A station housing thousands of beings was evacuated in a chaotic scramble. The scientists demanded punishment. They wanted exile, imprisonment, even death. But Ethan did not defend himself. He only said, "Now we know what will fail first." That night, alone in the observation room, he stared at the void where collapsing stars once burned. His eyes were tired, but his resolve was unbroken. He whispered to himself as if to the stars, "We've seen worse back home. We survive broken things. And we'll survive this too." Queen Seralith, watching him through hidden sensors, felt a strange stir in her chest. She had ruled countless civilizations, yet never had she seen courage like this. Not in soldiers, not in leaders, not in gods. Only in this human, standing small and fragile, yet carrying a weight that would have crushed titans. She whispered to herself, her voice lost among the ancient echoes of the chamber. "Perhaps we have underestimated them." The galaxy was waiting, and the human had just begun. To be continued. Ethan Cole worked in ways the Verrex Dominion had never seen. He did not rely on the immense computational power of their machines. He did not follow centuries of sacred protocols. He relied on something far stranger to the aliens: intuition, curiosity, and a willingness to fail. Every day, he walked among the floating labs, examining failing stars, studying charts, and asking questions that made even the oldest scientists shiver. "Why are we afraid to test failure?" he asked one morning, looking at a simulation that had cost 100 lives in the past. The lead scientist froze. The question was simple, almost childlike, but it was something no one had dared to voice. By the third day, Ethan had made small changes in the simulation, adjusting parameters here, shifting equations there. The Verrex scientists panicked. "You cannot do this," one cried. "These models are sacred." Ethan just smiled faintly. "Sacred doesn't mean correct," he said. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't argue. He only worked. And slowly, the machines began to show tiny improvements. Not enough to solve the crisis, but enough to show a new path. On the 5th day, he did something no one expected. He unplugged a central simulation mid-process. Alarms screamed through the lab, red lights flashing as the failure spread through secondary systems. Scientists shouted, demanding explanations, threatening exile. Ethan leaned against a console, calmly writing observations. "Now we know where it breaks," he said softly, almost to himself. The Verrex Council was horrified. "Do you understand what you've done?" one demanded. "You've endangered thousands." Ethan looked up, his brown eyes steady. "Yes," he said. "And we've learned more than any uninterrupted simulation could teach us." By the 7th day, Ethan was rewriting mathematical models that had remained untouched for centuries. The equations were sacred, etched into crystal panels, guarded by generations of Verrex scholars. Yet the human worked with confidence. The scientists watched in disbelief as he moved numbers, rearranged functions, and even discarded entire assumptions. "This is madness," one whispered. "No human can do this." Ethan shrugged. "Maybe humans aren't supposed to be perfect," he said quietly, but perfection was what the Dominion had relied upon for millennia. Their systems assumed flawless behavior. Their leaders trusted only precision. And this human, small and fragile, dared to touch everything they held sacred, and he succeeded in finding cracks they had ignored for centuries. By the 12th day, disaster struck. Ethan's prototype caused an artificial star to collapse far too early. A research station housing thousands of beings had to be evacuated in chaos. Scientists shouted, demanded punishment, even whispered of execution. Yet Ethan did not panic. He did not beg. He only said, "Now we know what will fail first." The Queen observed silently. sensing the calm logic in the human's voice. A logic rooted not in pride or fear, but responsibility. Night fell on the Dominion labs, and Ethan sat alone, staring at the stars through the massive observation window. The galaxy stretched endlessly before him, silent, mysterious, terrifying. His hands rested on the console, but his mind was far away, thinking of home. He whispered softly, almost as if speaking to the stars themselves. "We've seen worse back home. We survive broken things. And we'll survive this too." There was a quiet strength in the words, a resilience that came from humanity's history of hardship and survival. Queen Siralith watched him through hidden sensors. She had ruled for centuries. She had fought wars, negotiated peace, and overseen the destruction of rebellious planets. Yet nothing she had seen prepared her for this. A human, fragile and mortal, solving problems through patience, failure, and relentless curiosity. She realized something she had never admitted. Intelligence alone did not solve the universe's challenges. Courage, adaptability, and persistence did. The human did not complain when systems failed. He did not demand glory. He did not threaten or manipulate. He simply worked, day and night, using what humans had always relied on: determination, imagination, and the willingness to take risks that others could not. And slowly, the impossible began to bend toward reality. Small victories appeared in simulations. Small corrections slowed the collapse. Small hints of hope flickered where despair had ruled for centuries. By the evening of the 12th day, Queen Siralith whispered to herself, "Perhaps we have underestimated them. Not humans as warriors, not humans as rulers, but humans as problem solvers." Ethan Cole was not a hero in the traditional sense. He carried no sword. He commanded no fleets. He ruled no planets. Yet in these labs, in these simulations, he carried more power than any queen, any god, or any machine could ever wield. The power to make life continue. And the galaxy, vast and ancient, watched quietly, waiting to see if a human could finish what centuries of empires could not. To be continued. Queen Siralith had ruled for 10,000 years. She had commanded fleets that could destroy worlds, negotiated peace treaties that preserved entire systems, and watched as empires rose and fell beneath her gaze. She had seen courage, loyalty, and brilliance, but never like this. Ethan Cole moved among her scientists, fragile and small, yet carrying a weight she could feel across the crystal floor of the galactic court. He was not just solving equations. He was carrying the lives of billions. And somehow he did it without fear or complaint. That evening, she summoned him to the observation chamber. The walls were tall, lined with glowing panels showing failing stars, collapsing stations, and the chaos that still threatened the galaxy. Ethan entered quietly, hands in his pockets, eyes scanning the holographic projections as if they were mere puzzles on a table. Siralith's silver skin shimmered in the dim light, but her eyes betrayed her unease. "You've worked tirelessly for nearly 2 weeks," she said softly. "Do you feel the weight of all these lives?" Ethan paused, looking at the swirling images of planets and stars. He did not answer immediately. Finally he spoke, his voice calm but heavy with honesty. "I do, every single one. But I carry it differently than you might expect. I do what I can, and then I keep going. That's all I can do." Siralith's eyes narrowed. "But it is more than most beings can handle. Entire species have fallen under this burden. Why are you different?" Ethan looked down for a moment, thinking. "Where I come from, people fail all the time. Leaders fail. Systems fail. And yet, we survive. We keep fixing things. That's what makes humans strong. We've never had the luxury of perfection. We learn to carry the weight anyway." The queen tilted her head, studying him. There was no arrogance, no pretense. Only honesty. only the simple truth of someone who had lived with struggle, who had learned to carry it with quiet resilience. She felt a pang of something she had not felt in centuries: humility. "You carry responsibility like no one I have ever seen," she said. "It is remarkable." Ethan shrugged faintly. "I don't know if it's remarkable. It's just necessary. If I don't try, billions will die. If I don't push forward, nothing will get fixed. So I do it. That's all." For a long moment, the room was silent except for the low hum of failing star simulations. Saralith realized she had never considered the human perspective. To her species, strength came from perfection, from logic, from flawless execution. But humans thrived in imperfection. They carried uncertainty like a torch, illuminating paths no one else could see. "You are unlike any being I have encountered," she whispered. "Your courage is not in weapons or armies, but in simply facing what others cannot." Ethan gave a small smile, almost shy. "Courage isn't something we think about. We just do what must be done. Sometimes it works. Sometimes it doesn't, but we try anyway. That's our choice." Saralith stepped closer to him, her hands lightly resting on the edge of the observation console. "You risk more than any soldier, any pilot, any fleet commander. You face death every day, not with weapons, but with knowledge, with decisions, with your own self." Ethan's eyes softened. "I carry the weight because someone has to. You carry your people differently than I do, Your Majesty. You protect them with power. I protect them by fixing what breaks. It's not better. It's just different." The Queen studied him, feeling a strange warmth in her chest. She realized that this human, so small and seemingly fragile, understood responsibility in a way she had never seen. He bore it quietly, without fear or complaint. He bore it with humility, perhaps. She said slowly, "This is what makes humans strong. Not perfection, not technology, not armies. The weight you carry and the way you carry it. You keep going when others would fall. That is courage beyond my understanding." Ethan looked at her and gave the faintest shrug. "We've had to. Life never waits for perfection. If we wait, everything dies. So we fix it, even when it's hard, even when it seems impossible." The Queen was silent. For centuries, she had seen empires crumble. For centuries, she had believed that control and precision were all that mattered. But here was a human, carrying more than any one of her soldiers ever could, and doing it with quiet dignity and unshakable resolve. Saralith realized something then. The galaxy had never truly seen humans. They were small. They were young. They were fragile. And yet, they bore burdens that empires could not. They thrived where perfection failed. They endured when others gave up. And in that moment, Queen Saralith understood that the human before her, tired, plain, unarmed, but unyielding, was not just solving a crisis. He was showing the galaxy what it truly meant to endure. To be continued. The 18th day dawned quietly over the Varex dominion. The chamber was tense, filled with the low hum of failing stars and the anxious whispers of the greatest minds in the galaxy. Ethan Cole moved among them, calm as ever, his hands brushing against consoles, his eyes scanning data that would overwhelm even the most advanced alien intellect. Today was not like the others. Today, the crisis would either end or the galaxy would shatter. He stopped at the central control station. The stars outside glimmered, some flickering dangerously, their energy unstable. Ethan's fingers hovered over the keys. The simulations had been running for weeks, testing every variable, every possible sequence. And finally, he had found the solution. A solution that required total trust. A solution that no alien would have dared attempt. "Shut down the stars," he said quietly, his voice calm, almost casual. The room froze. Scientists turned sharply. disbelief flashing in their alien eyes. "What?" a lead researcher shouted. "You cannot. That will destroy billions of lives. It will collapse trade, warp time, erase entire systems." Ethan did not flinch. He looked at them steadily. "Trust me." "For 12 minutes," he said. His voice carried the weight of certainty that comes from experience and quiet courage. 12 minutes. That was all it would take. 12 minutes for the failing chain reaction to stabilize, for the unstable energy to reset. 12 minutes for life to continue. Queen Seralith rose slowly from her throne, her silver skin shimmering in the artificial starlight. Her long fingers hovered above the console. She had watched Ethan work for almost 3 weeks. She had doubted, feared, and even scolded him, but now she understood. Every risk he took, every failure he endured, had led to this. Her eyes met his, searching for hesitation. She found none. Finally she spoke, her voice soft but commanding. "Do it." Ethan's hands moved swiftly, his fingers dancing over controls in ways no one could follow. Outside, the artificial stars blinked one by one. Red lights dimmed. Alarms fell silent. The galaxy held its breath. For 12 minutes, time itself seemed to pause. Every being across countless worlds waited, though most did not know what they were waiting for. Inside the chamber, the tension was unbearable. Scientists gritted their teeth. Queens and rulers held their breath. And Ethan simply worked. Calm, steady, precise. He did not allow panic to touch him. He could feel the weight of billions of lives pressing down, but he carried it lightly. That was what humans did. They bore the impossible quietly, and then acted. Then, slowly, the stars outside began to stabilize. The flickering stopped. The unstable energy flowed into a steady rhythm. The chain reaction that had threatened the galaxy for centuries began to dissipate, controlled and harmless. 12 minutes passed. 12 minutes of silence, 12 minutes of hope trembling on the edge of disaster. And then cheers erupted. Not just in the chamber, but across the Dominion. Communication channels flooded with messages from civilizations that had been on the brink of extinction. Worlds that had been losing light and life suddenly shone again. Ships returned to orbit. Trade resumed. Families survived. The galaxy exhaled, trembling with relief. Queen Seralith sank slowly into her throne, her hands gripping the crystal edges. She had ruled over empires, fought wars, and commanded fleets, but she had never felt anything like this: relief, awe, and a strange, unfamiliar pride. She turned her gaze to Ethan, expecting him to look triumphant, proud, perhaps even smug. But he wasn't. He simply stood, tired, eyes scanning the console, checking numbers. His jacket was wrinkled. His hair stuck out. Dark circles marked his face. He had carried the galaxy on his shoulders, risked everything, and yet he looked almost ordinary. "Is it done?" he asked quietly, as if asking permission to leave. Seralith could only nod. Her voice caught in her throat. "Yes, it is done. You have saved trillions of lives." Ethan shrugged faintly. It was a small gesture, almost dismissive, but it carried the quiet honesty of someone who did what had to be done. "People are alive," he said simply. "That's enough." The Queen watched him, understanding for the first time something she had never grasped. Humans did not seek glory. They did not act for praise. They acted because they must. Because if they did not, nothing would survive. And that courage, the courage to act, to bear impossible weight without complaint, was far greater than any fleet, any army, any weapon, for the first time in her long reign. Queen Seralith felt something unfamiliar. She felt hope, raw and unbroken, born not from power, but from a human who dared to do what others could not. And across the galaxy, the impossible had been solved. To be continued. The galactic court had never been so silent. Not even during wars. Not even when entire civilizations vanished in a blink. Every ruler, every scholar, every soldier waited in the vast chamber, watching the human who had just bent the galaxy to his will, not with weapons, not with armies, but with patience, courage, and relentless determination. Ethan Cole stood in the center, plain, unassuming. His jacket was wrinkled, his boots scuffed, and his hands were streaked with sweat from endless work. He looked tired, worn down from sleepless nights and endless calculations. And yet, he stood taller than any emperor or queen in the room, not because of power, but because of what he had carried. The weight of billions of lives, carried quietly, uncomplainingly, until the impossible was done. Queen Siralith rose from her throne. Her silver skin shimmered under the chamber's starlight. She had witnessed countless victories in her life fleets, won battles. Armies conquered worlds, laws reshaped empires, but never had she felt such awe. She stepped forward slowly, her voice trembling, something rare for the Virex Queen. "You," she began, searching for words that could express what no words could truly capture. "You have saved more lives than any ruler, any god, any machine could have saved. You have done what our most brilliant minds could not achieve in centuries." Ethan looked at her, calm as ever. He did not raise his voice. He did not smile triumphantly. He simply shrugged. The room went completely still. A single human gesture, so ordinary, yet so profound, echoed across the chamber, louder than any shout or cheer. This simple shrug, casual and humble, carried more meaning than the queen could grasp at first. It was the shrug of someone who did not seek glory, someone who had carried the impossible burden simply because it had to be done. Siralith felt her chest tighten. She had ruled with logic, with precision, with fear of failure. And here stood a human, fragile by every measure, who had achieved what her empire could not. And yet, he did not claim the credit. He did not boast. He did not demand reverence. He simply accepted the outcome as though it were natural, as though saving trillions of lives was ordinary work. "You," she said again, quieter this time. "Why are you not proud?" Ethan met her eyes. "Pride doesn't save lives," he said softly. "I did what had to be done. People are alive. That's enough." His words were simple, but they struck the chamber like a hammer on crystal. There was no arrogance, no pretense, only honesty, the kind that humans had carried through every disaster on Earth, the kind that could carry a galaxy through collapse. The alien rulers exchanged glances, whispers passing among them like wind over glass. Some were angry, some bewildered, some humbled. They had spent centuries seeking perfection, relying on machines, logic, and hierarchies. Yet all of that had failed. And now, a single human had solved what they could not. With curiosity, courage, and determination, he had rewritten the rules of the possible. Queen Siralith stepped closer. Her voice softened to a whisper, almost intimate. "You did what our gods could not. You saved us all." Ethan's shoulders lifted in a slight shrug. "Like I said," he murmured, almost shyly, "it needed doing." For the first time in centuries, the queen bowed not in formality, not in submission, but in recognition of courage beyond her comprehension. She saw the truth of humans for the first time. They were not perfect. They were fragile, fallible, often chaotic, but they had something the galaxy had underestimated for too long. They had perseverance. They had resilience. And they had the courage to act when others hesitated. The chamber remained silent, not with fear, but with awe. The rulers of thousands of worlds were witnessing something extraordinary. A species so young, so small, yet capable of carrying the impossible. And doing it without claiming godhood. Ethan finally turned to leave the chamber, his work complete. The queen watched him go, understanding at last what the galaxy had been missing for centuries. Humans were not conquerors or rulers, they were problem solvers, survivors, carriers of hope in places where hope seemed impossible. And somewhere in the silence, the galaxy learned a new truth, that courage could come in the smallest forms, in the quietest voices, and even in a single, unassuming shrug. To be continued. After the crisis ended, the galaxy was changed forever. Not by weapons, fleets, or laws. Not by empires, treaties, or technology. It was changed by a human who had carried the impossible, faced failure, and refused to give up. Ethan Cole walked through the galactic court quietly, no fanfare, no celebration, no grand speeches. The rulers of countless worlds watched him with a mixture of awe, fear, and admiration. And yet, he walked as if nothing extraordinary had happened. To him, it was simply work that needed doing. Word of his deeds spread quickly. Messages traveled faster than light, from one system to another, recounting how a single human had solved the stellar collapse crisis in 18 days. Worlds that had been on the brink of extinction suddenly had hope again. Star systems that had lost communication now buzzed with life. Trade routes reopened. Civilizations that had trembled at the thought of annihilation resumed their daily lives. And beings across the galaxy whispered one question to each other: who is this human?